A very warm welcome to everybody to the session. This is a session that's kind of very close to my heart as well, the topic. And at NASSCOM, driving technology, innovation, and talent is what we go by. And we strongly believe that driving innovation is very key to building any ecosystem, right? And with that, and that's why I say this topic is very, very close to my heart. And who better than Kris to help us get started on this conversation today here. And I just want to, before we kickstart the session, I'd just like to share a few insights that we gathered recently from a session, couple of sessions that we did with a whole lot of incubators across the country. All of these 51 incubators are housed with the IITs and the IIMs and the IIITB, all academic incubators, all funded by the central government MeitY. Every one of them in those roundtable discussions, representatives from these incubators talked about how essential corporate partnership and enterprise connect was for the success of their startups, right? And it was a learning for us as well, while we drive a very key program called NIPP, where we connect startups to enterprises, but to see that overall, the rising importance of corporate partnership is become so critical to building this whole enterprise startup ecosystem. With that, I think we're going to have a very good discussion today. There were 3 or 4 things that came up along with corporate mentorship in that discussion there. One was market access, and the other was tech mentoring. And so it beautifully ties into, and I'm very, very keen to, hear what Kris has to address us, and then we will have a panel discussion with Alok as well, and dive more into this conversation. I'd love to introduce Kris. Kris is Chief Technology Officer for NTT DATA Services. He leads the company's global intelligent automation technology strategy. In addition, Kris leads client innovation programs, leveraging NTT Group R&D and related investments to enhance service delivery and business outcomes to our clients. Kris has over 40 years of progressive experience in IT, spanning industries from retail to telecom, digital banking, transfer to commercial, and others. Kris currently serves as a member of the University of Texas, Johnson School of Engineering, and Computer Science Executive Council, and is a contributor to Forbes Technology Council. Kris, we're delighted to have you with us. And with that, I request you to address the group, and post which we will have a panel discussion and definitely take more questions as we go along. Kris, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Kritika. Thank you, Alok, and good morning. If you could share the presentation, please.
Yes, Kris, wait a second.
Thank you.
I believe you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can, Will. If you want to go into slide shorter mode or present mode, please. Thank you. So first of all, thank you, Kritika, and good morning from the US. Good evening, India. Good. I guess it would be kind of a really bad time of day, midday for Europe. But thank you for joining us. And it's interesting we're having this. I think it's interesting, especially doing virtual conferences, Zoom conferences, which have become over the last 6 months, much more of the norm, I think, with all the pandemic and challenges. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all this morning. Next slide, please. And I think, as you mentioned, Kritika, the topic is interesting because the topic is innovation, and why is innovation so important today? If you go to slide 2, please, Raul. Thank you. If you look at it, we kind of look at innovation almost on 2 halves. There's the innovation as it drives for the organization and the associates. There's also innovation that changes the ecosystem. And if you look at it, one side of this is it's really around growth. It's around change. It's about helping companies differentiate themselves. How do you change the processes? It's also, I would think, equally important, the culture of innovation. If you think about companies of where you want to work, where you want to participate, is where innovation is a key part of what they do. But on the ecosystem, it raises the bar for everyone. It allows more sustainable environments. It allows, in effect, a different type of roles and jobs for the future. When I've been over in India and talked to our teams there, and they talk about innovation, they really are excited about how they get to work on new topics and new things that use their mind less than it uses their hands. So they're very excited about how we drive change and drive their increased enhancement. Next slide, please. So if you look at technologies, what's interesting, I'd say, is the technologies that are really active during this time in 2020 really haven't changed a lot. It's not like they're different, but what's changed is the accelerated use of them. If you think about the whole idea of automation, you know, it's been around for a long time. Well, how has it become more important with the aspect of much more variable activity in work? Blockchain from a security standpoint, how do we trade in different ways? You know, you think about the whole aspect of edge computing as you move more and more compute out of the data center to the edge, how it's driving those changes. And I would think perhaps the most impactful probably is in that artificial intelligence or data science space. Why? Because the ability to make decisions more quickly, to understand your clients and provide them a more personal experience has become even more important when more and more of our interaction is via the internet and via the web. You know, and interesting piece to my mind is it's also key is the whole aspect of artificial intelligence ethics and the data that drive it have become forefront. It isn't just about can I make the decisions? How do I provide transparency? How do I make sure people understand the decisions that we're making? All these are driving change at a faster and faster pace. Next slide, please. So if you look at the key challenges, and it's interesting, if you'd talk to folks back, you know, in the May, June timeframe around COVID, it was around connectivity. How will my workers work remote? Then almost working remote became the norm. But what's actually changed is those businesses are realizing they have to move even faster. So I've had comments from customers of, we just completed our 2-year digital plan last month. You know, they have to get to market faster. They're looking at things, instead of doing a lot of proof of concepts and long projects and iteration, very quick proof of values. How do I prove something works and scale to it? Okay. The reliance on automation has taken a different twist. It's no longer just the, I'm going to automate for savings. I'm automating for flexibility. If I have to have a call center due to COVID issues, all of a sudden double in size, I can't find the people to train. So it becomes more of the scalability part of it. And then the whole way of doing business, the whole idea of shopping online, of partial grocery delivery, all of that has just exploded as people have gotten very creative on how you keep doing business in COVID times. And as part of that, how does IT, how do businesses do it? A lot of it is through partnering with startups from companies that are out there doing it the new way to get there faster. Next slide, please. So NTT Data and NTT Group is very committed to innovation, and it starts at the top with the fact that NTT Group spends about 3.6 billion US on innovation R&D each year, with thousands of engineers, thousands of patents, very keen on driving it. And it goes kind of everything from core research around things such as 5G and quantum and AI, into really innovation pragmatically, you know, for the clients around automation, scanning. One of the interesting things they had, for example, is the ability to use AI for looking at airport X-ray scanners. So instead of relying just on the person looking at the image of the X-ray, AI can look at it and say, oh, that's a 5-ounce bottle of lotion that's only half empty. The ability to actually provide a higher quality and augment the human is a key part of that. Along with that, it's not just R&D part, it's the continual challenge with our clients, with our partners of how do we innovate on an ongoing basis. And then how do you bring that across the globe? So innovation out of, whether it's Spain or out of Bengaluru or out of, you know, Mumbai, how does that bring innovation across the business is part of the key value of NTT. We want to make sure we leverage that for our clients, our partners, and also for our associates. Next slide, please. So when we say innovation, how do we look at that pragmatically. I'm going to kind of start from the right and go left. So we start out with kind of technology foresight. We every year look out there and say, what's happening in the next 3 to 10 years? What's happening around the social issues and then the technology issues? You know, you think about the issue of a flat screen device we're talking on today to much more of a virtual concept. How do you have more of an immersive experience when you engage with people? Think about shopping virtually and being able to feel like you actually could touch the shoes or turn the shoes sideways as you would if you were inside of a store. Well, then how do you execute that? One of our modes of execution are hackathons. We have internal hackathons, external and global ones, where there is a single challenge, you know, using geospatial information to find out the effect of COVID on transportation in the world. We publish that using things, and usually like things like Google, then have that competition for scientists around the world to compete to try and solve a problem. And then to the item we're talking today about, which is our Open Innovation Contest, which is a global program, in effect, bring challenges and startups and NTT data together. Next page, please. So with permission, Kritika, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the contest this year, what it means and how it works, and how, in effect, the companies who are sharing today can participate. Next slide, please. So this is a great opportunity. So this is a competition that is really designed to take our clients' challenges, the startup community, and NTT data, and bring it together to understand how to drive co-innovation, co-creation of idea. You know, it's kind of like a Shark Tank where as we create the competition, companies come in, they will share what they're doing, we'll have questions, and have a chance then to, in effect, partner with those who win. And the idea is to co-innovate together and drive output that is value to our clients. Next slide, please. So let me click down one more level. So first of all of the challenges, and here are 14 examples of our challenges, came from our clients. So these are not, you know, made up by the corporation or some executive. These came from companies like Grupo Bimbo, Coca-Cola, T-Mobile. These are challenges that they have. And the benefit of that is if a company competes on this challenge, they already know that there's a client out there, a company who is ready to co-innovate with them and bring that to market. Secondarily, it's not just about I'll call it the corporate challenges. A key part of it is how do these challenges impact society? So one of the key measurements is how these challenges also are against the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Are they helping with health? Are they helping with clean air, clean water? Are they driving a better impact to society? Because that's a key part of our measurement of how success is for innovation. Thirdly, it's not just about the winner, okay? Because in fact, many of the companies, even if they were just finalists, still ended up partnering with a company because in fact, they saw something, they liked that, and they partnered with them. So in fact, one of the finalists a couple of years ago, in effect, became part of our Smart City program in the city of Las Vegas, driving innovation around IoT. So this is really about engaging with the clients and seeing them. You know, these are held so all of the competitors, all the clients get a chance to interact before, during, and after the competition. It's also a virtual competition this year, which means you're not being asked to fly to some city, find time to be there. We're going to have 2 of these. Okay, we will in effect take the finalists down to 2 events and hold it virtually globally to give you much more access to all companies in all cities. Next slide, please. So this is just one example of, in effect, one of the companies last year, which in fact NTT is now out there actually marketing this as a solution. So it didn't just go with a company, one of our clients, but NTT Data has made this one of our key solutions. So that's the third aspect of it. You can just have a partnership with NTT Data and the client, or it could become one of our key products we offer. So to us, all of this is really tying to what you said earlier, Kritika. This is not just corporate sponsorship, but engaging with clients to give access for startup companies to drive innovation and creativity. And with that, I'll pass the board back to you, Kritika.
Thank you, Kris. That definitely was, very. It's nice to see the approach and the whole perspective about having startups present who where just the winner is not the winner, but different solutions presented are winners, right? And so I request you to stay on while I take a moment to introduce Alok before we kickstart our presentation. Alok, thank you so much for taking time to be with us. To quickly introduce Alok, Alok is co-founder and CEO of Indifi, a platform to expand access to debt financing for Indian SMEs. Alok is a successful first-generation entrepreneur based in India. He's also the founding member of Indian Angel Network, which is a forum for making angel investments. He last led India operations of Canon Partners, a premium US-based venture capital firm. Earlier, he co-founded JobsAhead.com in 1999. JobsAhead.com is the leading e-recruitment business focused on the Indian market and is acquired by Monster.com recently. Alok, thank you so much for being with us, and post the conversation, post Kris's presentation, I'd like to dive into this whole conversation for our audiences to benefit innovation for startups. So Alok, I'll start with you on, you've been part of this industry. You've seen the startup ecosystem in India grow very closely, been part of, a very integral part of it. What, in your view, makes a startup or a small business truly innovative, and why? What are some of the yardsticks that you would put to it?
So first, Kritika, thanks for having me here. And Kris, thanks for the great presentation. I think the notion of innovation in my mind starts from the customer, right? In highly IP-driven ecosystems, you could argue that a lot of innovation starts from the technology innovation. However, the Indian market continues to be more a user-driven market than a technology-driven market. And to that extent, the empathy and a deep understanding of customers' needs is often the focal point of innovation. Right? India is also relatively a white space market, right? So most startups are not disrupting an existing business. Most startups are going out and serving customers who earlier were massively underserved. And that requires even more design thinking around those customers and their context and the problem they're facing to understand why they are not being served till today. There's typically a very good reason. And technology can then be the tool to solve for that, right? So in our case, for example, we go out and serve underserved small businesses. But given that the banking sector is so competitive, there's the best talent that goes to the banking sector. Why are they underserved, right? It's key for us to be able to then claim, our right to serve those customers. Right? So that is very often kind of my focal point when I look at startups. Of who's your customer? If they are underserved, why are they underserved? Do you really understand what the problem is, or are you just looking at the symptoms of that problem? And to the extent that those entrepreneurs can, embed themselves into the customer context and answer those questions, that's typically a starting point for a great business.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Alok. Kris, I will ask you the same question, but I'd really like to get your thoughts on. What, from a very global perspective, do you even see any difference, right, in how different ecosystems or different countries are viewing this whole thing on innovation and startups being innovative, and why? Do you see any difference from a global standpoint?
Well, it's interesting because I see lots of differences, but in some ways it's almost more similar than different. And I say, Alok, you said it well. Serving the underserved, in fact, almost has two halves to it. There's the underserved, which are maybe from just a standard, standpoint of products and services, not from a social demographic, but just, hey, here's a need that someone's having. But I think there's also the underserved that has the other side of it, is those that have always had a challenge of getting to healthcare, getting clean water. And I think innovation has a key part of that also. Now, that's where the challenges are different. I think almost across the globe, people are doing the unmet customer need. That's, I'd say, more the uniform. but the underserved part of it varies by what that area is. In many areas, healthcare, for example, you take rural America, rural India, there are different issues, but some of the underserved problems are still there. They don't have access to the clinicians. They don't have access to the people. So the whole idea of virtual has become a new thing, okay? But when you get over to Western Europe, maybe versus Africa, some of the ability to access that technology-wise changes the solutions to the underserved. We think of internet and access as kind of ubiquitous. It really isn't. So sometimes, even though the markets are similar, the challenge of serving them based on that technology infrastructure can be very different.
Right. Yeah, thanks. That leads me to another question on, the whole technology part of it, right? There's so much conversation on AI and, blockchain and, how do you see this, Alok? How have you, is there like such a huge impact like what we're reading and what we're seeing? What is your ground level feel on this?
So there is a lot of reality and there is a lot of buzz around AI, right? And I recently got to know that what I did 30 years back in my college was also AI, right? The way AI is classified today, it did qualify. Felt good about that. But on a more serious note, I think entrepreneurs are aware of where the reality lies. So normally, having been in the ecosystem and invested in dozens of startups, I will let entrepreneurs sell what they want to sell. That's okay. But it's important for entrepreneurs to know what AI will do for them today, what it will do for them 3 to 5 years down the line, what is it that it won't do. And I think smart entrepreneurs are navigating that very well, right? So one of the companies, for example, that I've invested in, they've used, fairly sophisticated AI to diagnose depression, using just a mobile chatbot, right? So there are clearly problems out there that command the use of these technologies and have data that is rich enough to power effective utilization of these technologies, right? But even the domain that I am in, right, which is lending, and we make a lot of credit decisions and so on, we are just beginning to scratch the surface on AI. For the first 5 years of our existence, what is logistics regression, the old way of doing stuff, what I studied 30 years back, still suffices. And the reality is we didn't have the data to power the really sophisticated algorithms and not get them to overfit, right? So there is reality. There is, if I hear 10 pitches which claim the use of AI, there's probably one that is really doing something which is meaningful. But if I fast forward this 5 years to 10 years, right, data is becoming more open. It's getting more voluminous. It's getting more and more dynamic. And all of those make it a ripe environment for these tools really to take over and start to move the needle.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Alok. Insightful. So, Kris, data. You have to comment on this and you have to talk about it. So, your take on, what you're seeing.
Well, Alok had some key pieces, and I did write down data, and then data and data. It's interesting because I love the AI point because, I think of the Turing definition of AI, which is that, in fact, it wouldn't, if you were having a conversation, neither you nor it would know that they weren't human. So we're not quite there yet. Look, give us 5 or 10 years. But the data piece is interesting because, there's a whole discussion around transparency, about bias, all these things around AI. But when you actually pull back, much of it's based on the data. If I feed an AI engine all data that says everything is a McDonald's hamburger, then it's going to think at the end of the day that everything is a hamburger. And so we forget the issue of good data, quality data is not new, but it's still the key factor in AI, providing the right information. So your data point's well taken. But I think even more than that is how we're using data now in that more, I'll say it's faster. So where you may have made decisions before in weeks and months to create a model, it's now moving to real time. One of our key insurance clients out of UK, literally for property and casualty car insurance, is now doing real-time pricing per policy. Okay, and that wasn't even thought about. And they're doing that because they found that they were able to get more customers by being able to understand, well, where's the person in the buyer cycle? Where have they been to before? What are they thinking about? These were all factors that said, hey, I'm more likely to get a look as a client if I offer this one little feature. Okay, and so that's where I think it's changing the game. It's actually allowing massive personalization like almost never before in the conversation. The other thing that's interesting about the data is you think about it, we think about traditional type data, but it's a lot of the unstructured, it's the non-traditional data that's really providing the ability for AI to do more. So it's not just like transactional. So in the healthcare space, it's not the claims, it's the other information about the person, their social network, how they interact that tells me, am I able to introduce? So it's that other plethora of data that's expanding that's really, I think, powering that real growth in AI.
Right. Right. Yeah. So Kris, this conversation, I'll just shift gears a bit, and I will. What are your thoughts on startups developing a sustainable competitive advantage? What, according to both of you, right? And Kris, you could go first. And what according to you is a sustainable competitive advantage? I'd really like some of our startups to know about this.
Well, I think it's, a look started with part of this is first of all, truly understand what you're trying to accomplish. It's like you said, don't start with the tech, start with the outcome. So I think number one, clear vision. The second piece is never standing still on what you're doing it for. So even if you're doing something great today, the market and businesses are changing. So what got you there fast, keep you thinking forward. So don't stand still is a key part of it. The third thing is find and understand what is your key value. Is it in the tech? Is it in the application? Is it in the client engagement? So, all parts of startup engagement aren't the same thing. And finding those pieces are key. I think the last thing also is having a great team. Understanding within your team, where's that engineering anchor? Where's that business development anchor and engagement part, and having the ability with that and your partner ecosystem to drive the engagement model, because you could have the greatest solution, but if you can't explain it to Alok and myself in a way that we can understand it and get it in front of our clients, it's not going to go somewhere. On the flip side, someone who's got the best story that really gets you excited and the tech's almost not quite there, guess what? They may win because we're going to drag them along with us because we feel like they're a key partner for us.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. Alok, your take on?
No, I think it's amazing what Kris mentioned, right? Because normally, the answer to where is the sustainable competitive advantage will take you into the nitty-gritties of business models and what you got to do there and the competitive markets and all of that. But it probably lies where you least expect it to lie, which is plain old execution, right? Whether it is people execution, whether it is your business model execution, partnerships, right? And I tend to agree with that. I think for many of the startups, at least the first 5 to 10 years of their journey is about doing the basics right and making sure that they can execute on the customer insights. Ideas are cheap. Multiple people have the same idea at the same point in time. It does come down to who's executing on them better, who's more nimble, who can continue to build that customer empathy as they move along. I must say that at a point where the business model starts to get a little bit more structured, there is this whole derivative effect that starts to flow in, right? And that is becoming the sustainable advantage. If you look at the big tech companies, right, the level of dominance there is higher than ever. Yeah. And it is built on these positive reinforcement loops, which are inherent to their business models, right? How does being in business today allow me to naturally improve tomorrow and every single day of the company, right? So I think entrepreneurs are thinking more and more about, what those positive feedback loops in their business are, which can strengthen the business with every transaction that they do. So the transaction is not just valuable for the transaction, but it is valuable because it makes your next transaction smarter.
Right.
And I think that is a core characteristic of many of the high growth startups now,
Right.
which really starts to build defenses like we've never seen before.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Alok. That's very insightful, and this is the problem, having two extremely well accomplished people who are so precise with their answers that so I have to think faster than ever on my feet here trying to moderate this. And no, but interesting to shift gears a bit here now and really talk about the whole corporate startup engagement and partnership, right? We've definitely seen a huge increase in the way this whole corporate partnership is kind of buzzing in the last couple of years, right? From accelerators to use cases, it's massive. But it does have its own, I won't say bottlenecks is it's not the right word, but in terms of definitely can be more streamlined, right? So what, according to you, Alok, could be some of the key success factors or key things that you see are very important for a corporate startup engagement?
So I think the first thing in my mind is the clarity of goals, right? And on both on part of the startup as well as on part of the corporate, which is willing to or which is keen to establish such a program. Now, if I look at it from a startup standpoint, right? I think at different stages of the startup, there are different value additions that such a corporate partnership can bring in, right? If someone is going from 0 to 1, honestly, the biggest value addition that a corporate partnership brings in is credibility, right? So in enterprise businesses specifically, we are always hunting for that one reference account. Imagine having a partnership is like having that reference account on steroids, right? Your product due diligence is done, your market diligence is done, and you potentially have one partner who's willing to go take you out in the market, right? So that can put the startup in a high growth mode, attract other resources, people, capital, right, to the startup. At the next stage of the startup, corporate partnerships are often about balancing scale with strategic interest, right? So this is a typical stage at which an entrepreneur wants to grow fast. They see a corporate partnership as one way of doing that. But at the same time, it's important for that entrepreneur to retain control over the value of the company, because they still want to build more and not necessarily realize at that point in time.
Right.
And at a mature stage, this can mean strategic options, exits, where does the business naturally belong, being able to answer all of those questions. And to the extent corporate partnership programs can serve these objectives, they'll be more and more attractive to entrepreneurs, right? So actually, I think there's an art in understanding when to start to exercise strategic control and when is it premature, both for the startup and for the company to do that. Right? Kris referred to the notion of actually being able to take a product jointly to the market.
Right.
That's a very high degree of commitment on part of the company. Right? What brings in that commitment? Do entrepreneurs understand that? What do they have to deliver? So I think, like any other partnership, a lot of this is about understanding each other's goals, and being able to design programs that fit into it. One thing that I've seen being done a lot is corporate accelerators and incubators. And while I like that as a general concept, sometimes that becomes just a marketing exercise, very little support behind it. Right? As an investor who's looking at a startup, I'm looking for that support, right? I can solve for marketing.
Right.
But what I'm really looking for is, if this is a company that says this company is part of my incubator or accelerator, what does that mean, right? What is the diligence that they've exercised to select this company?
Yes.
Right? What is it that they can do for this company in terms of ensuring a certain maturity of the product or the solution where this product might just fit in as one piece?
Right.
And what can they enable for the company in terms of go-to-market? Can they help the company get the first 5 customers?
Right.
Right. So I think that depth of solutioning in that partnership is really critical.
Yeah. No, Alok, thanks for, articulating this so well, right? Because one thing that we see, and, this is something I'd like insights from Kris on this is, through the whole NIPP program of ours, one of the roadblocks that we see is how the innovation teams and even the top management in most cases is very passionate about working with startups and seeing how they can build that whole open innovation platform. But, when it further trickles down to teams that they have to work with across sector, across other departments, right? We see it slowing down for various reasons. So, Kris, I'd really like you to help us demystify this a bit.
Well, I think you made the good point, Alok, that corporate engagement, that is the anchor you're talking about, Kritika. What does that mean? And I think about it from our standpoint is we look at it probably from three angles. First of all, we have an investment group that just invest in startups because they make financial interest to us, okay? And that's one of our engagements. There's a second piece, which is I'm going to invest in startups that can help me as a company to grow. Okay, very deterministic. And in that case, Kritika, there is alignment to the organization. We've decided this is a challenge we are trying to solve and a product to bring to market. Look, your point is that's where you're going to find the depth, because you're going to find that whole process of this is a gap we have. And we're going to look at that startup as, hey, how do we, in effect, some cases, maybe decouple pieces of it to say, this is where you keep the IP and things you want to own. Here's where I bring the scale that I think gives us the value. That's how both of us grow together, okay? The innovation side is I'll call it the third leg, and it's the leg of, I don't know yet. I don't have this solved yet. And to me, in some cases, the more exciting, because this is very planned, deterministic, it has kind of an engine. This is the spark, okay? And the goal there is, sometimes you're right, Kritika, the spark's going to happen, and the challenge is having companies that are open to the spark. And that's why we've engaged our clients in the spark first, because the point is, if our clients were to bring an issue to us, for example, and say, hey, I've got this challenge, we're going to bend over backwards as a company to solve that for our clients. So that's where the depth really comes in. As you said, forget the marketing, forget that part. Look at our clients. So when I've got 3 or 4 clients on the page with me for something, that's the engine that drives, I think, the corporations more than anything else. So that's why we like the open innovation piece, because that's where the client spark is really driving the conversation. And we're open to say, look, we don't know where this is going to go. We know it's in our sphere of interest. So I'm not going to do a spark for an area that doesn't really interest us at all. But boy, I put 1 and 1 together, I get 5. And that's where I think the engine really begins to fire and drive it and drive the change to it.
I think the marketing part is important, right? Because you want the selection of the best of startups that are attempting a certain problem there. So I get that. But what I really found interesting, Kris, in your presentation was also this whole approach of bringing specific challenges to the table. Because normally then there is a customer to that challenge, whether internal or external. So it does create that business alignment. And at the same time, it's very, very transparent to the startups as to what is it that you're looking for, right? So they can almost self-select themselves. While even coming to you.
You're right, and it's also fun because it's although the challenge is there, the answer isn't. So the opportunity for the startup is to say, I see your challenge, I'm going to answer it this way, not this way. And the openness from the client is, I'm not going to tell you. Our coaching to our clients was, don't make your challenge so specific that there's only one answer. Make your challenge a little more open, because if you're trying to solve this problem, let's look at various ways, because back to your point of a sustainable value, sometimes coming at it from a different angle is where that value comes, because everyone's going down the pipe this way. Someone else stood up one level and turned left. Right. And no one else is out there. It's a green field. Now I've got more sustainable value to go forward with.
Right. While I do have a couple of more questions, but, just considering time and there are a whole bunch of questions that have come in, on the platform. So, somebody's asking us a question on saying, what would be a good place to build innovation for my product? US, UK, India, or some other geography, and why?
Who would you like to answer that first, Kritika?
You can go, Kris. Then
to my mind, it's interesting because I don't think there is a preference except for where you may want to market it. first. And so to me is we look at innovation equally from a variety of geographies. And with half of our employees in India, it's a key source of innovation for us. So we think it's a great place. The U.S. is a great venture market and a lot of really sharp pieces to it. We find a lot of things also out of Israel and out of Western Europe. So to my mind it's really, I think nowadays, especially virtually, it's less important where the innovation comes from and more important how you choose to engage with the corporate and business community and do that. So that's, I think, where the focus is more, less of where you are to innovate. The only piece I'd add to that, though, is you need to innovate where there's a strong IP protection for the innovator. Because if you're bringing something to the market that is you want to be comfortable with the fact that when I begin sharing that I can maintain, as you made the comment, Alok, some sense of control over my asset. And I think that ownership capability is a key part of the value that allows the startups and the communities to keep on working.
Alok, would you like to add anything to this?
I think Kris covered it, right? So being close to customers, again, is top of my list for everything that we can do on Zoom and do quite well. I think there is still advantage to being closer to customers, to be able to being able to sit with them and picking up all the informal signals that you can. IP, but also just the ability to do business in multiple geographies, right? A lot of Indian software companies, SaaS companies, are looking at multiple markets where they want to be able to conduct business. And so you want to be based in a location that from, corporate structure standpoint, revenue standpoint, taxation standpoint, provides you with an efficient way of conducting business globally.
Sure. Alok, there's one that's come in specifically for you. It says, so he's asking, I run a video hiring platform. Apart from technologies, how are you seeing job market changing in the next decade? What should be the focus market for startups like us?
Yeah. So interestingly, after I built and sold my job board, the significant innovation that has happened in the job market is LinkedIn, right? So essentially, how do you create engagement with passive job seekers, right? Job boards were always the hunting ground for active job seekers. And LinkedIn has done a great job of building that out and monetizing that on the jobs opportunity. But I sold my company 15 years back, right? So there's not a whole lot of innovation that has come in. There are some tools that have come in. So I can do video interviews, I can do applicant tracking a little bit better. Where I really see this going is, the nature of jobs is changing, right? There are fewer full-time jobs. There's a lot of gig working that is coming into play, freelancers, and that creates its own set of challenges throughout what you might call the employee life cycle. Right. There's a challenge of identifying people who are willing to work on those terms. There's a problem of articulating what those terms refers to, right? Is it just that I'll work 3 hours a day? Is it that I have a constraint on not being able to work with other people in the same space? How does IP protection happen? Right. There's a challenge of what that platform of work looks like. Am I going to come into office or not? How am I going to reflect on corporate systems? Right? How am I going to collaborate? Right? There is this whole notion of how do you measure output. In many of our companies, when we work with full-time people, yes, there are some key deliverables, KRAs, whatever you want to call them. But end of the day, there is a lot of obfuscation of all of that under relationships, culture. Right? This person is contributing, even though we can only measure 30% of what they are contributing. Right? So that will change. So I think this whole rise of gig economy, and by gig economy, I don't just mean food delivery boys, right? I mean people like you and me who are doing white collar jobs will work extensively in this mode. That whole stack will need to get built up, right? And I think that is the significant change in the underlying job market, which will then drive changes in what job boards should look like. Right, what Slack should look like, what Zoom should look like, all of those questions. So I think that is where the significant disruption is taking place.
Right. Great. Kris, there's one that's specifically for you. At a micro level, corporates can do innovation within the organization. What would enable such micro innovation that solves customer operational problems within an organization?
So it's a great question, and it's something that I think we try and make sure we do every day is how do you, in effect, challenge the teams on the ground to change their game? They're part of the challenges is you're there every day, so they have the highest visibility of what could be different. So how do you challenge them to be innovative? How do you create that? I think there's three parts of it. One is, first of all, you have to have the culture of rewarding innovation. Okay, of in fact rewarding something doing differently. And I'll take an example, Kritika. One of our teams, recently I met with in India, who had innovated themselves out of a job. Okay, now they were moved on to a different job, which was part of our growth, doing something that was more interesting. And I asked them afterwards, how did that feel? And they said, great. And I'm like, yeah, really? They said, no, because we were able to move on to more interesting things to do, more intellectually stimulating. So the idea is how do you find them to say, hey, where can you provide innovative value, but then also reward them for that, with in fact the bonuses, incentives. So you have to create that culture of it's not just okay to sit, think differently. And I use a phrase I heard at a conference one time, when you get up in the morning, ask yourself, if I were a startup, would I do this way? Because the startups don't have all the resources and scale and all the tools that we do. And so sometimes some of the best creativity comes into, well, I can't do it that way. How would I do it? And if that's a good idea, raise your hand. Look at it differently, because I think that's the challenge for all of us is not letting the engine get so large and so, integrated that you can't say, how is this different? Raise your hand, bring that idea up, because some of those best ideas can be that growth of change that can spawn the best products.
Yeah. Thanks, Kris. We're almost reaching the end of, I just want to be respectful of time, but there are tons of questions. But I think to sum up a couple of questions that have been coming in, we'll take both your viewpoints on this, and then we'll try and wrap that up with that. Last decade, we saw a rise of e-commerce and aggregators across sectors. What's your prediction, or what do you see for the next decade? Where do you see most innovative business models? What areas of innovative business models do you see coming up, right? That kind of sums up a bunch of questions that have come in as well. Alok, do you want to go first on this?
Sure. So let me take a stab at it. I often get this wrong in my investment shoes, but this is only a Zoom call. So
and I appreciate you going first to look so I can think about my answer.
So I think from a business model standpoint, there are multiple industries that are still unsolved for, right? I think we've by and large figured out the business model of buying and selling goods, but we haven't really figured out much more, right? Healthcare is an unsolved business model. And I say that because, regardless of which country you're looking at, right, you can identify enough holes in the healthcare system. Somewhere healthcare is too expensive. Somewhere the burden on public resources is too high. And somewhere like in markets like India, it's just not accessible affordably across the board, right? Now this has, technology challenges and all of that, but it has a central business model challenge, right? Who benefits from, great health in a society? Who should pay for it? How should it get charged? How do outcomes get factored into how healthcare should get priced? So there are several, very interesting business model questions in healthcare. I think some of the friction around the kind of solutions that the market would adopt have actually, that friction has started to ease away because of COVID, ironically because of a disease, where, for example, teleconsultations are seeing a big rise, right? So there is inherent efficiency that can come into some of those models. Education as a business model is unsolved for. Who should pay for education? Who benefits from education, right? And for past 50 years, at least the developed geographies have said, society benefits from education and we are going to pay for it. but honestly, they're running at the end of the road in terms of how much can they finance higher ed, right? So that is coming back into the private domain, and we don't yet know the answer of who should pay and when should they pay, right? The best answer we got is a student loan. So I think there are several very large spaces where business models are unsolved for, and partially it is because of lack of scalable, affordable, and high quality solutions, right? This triad of accessibility, affordability, and quality, right? That is what we need to break, and technology seems to be the only tool for us to break that, right? Now, you will have to weave a business model around that technology, right? But given the current set of technological choices, it doesn't seem we can get all those three to add up. So that's the exciting part in my mind about the next 10 years. I think the scale of problems that need to get solved are even larger than what has created even a couple of $1 trillion companies in the past.
Yeah, I want to add to that, and to me, this is part of why we're excited to have the Open Innovation Contest right now, Kritika, because what you mentioned, Alok, is it's a chance for us to step outside of the current model and ask someone to come at this from a different angle. To ask the startups who are in effect unencumbered by our limitations, by our blinders, and say, oh, you talk about healthcare to the underserved. We might think, oh, let's create an app for that. Hey, we're a software company, let's create an app for that. And someone else says, no, there's something to do with, a mobile, something different with facial recognition that can, something that can be total different angle. So to me is the innovation contest is about, in fact, that exact piece is step outside of the models, come at it from a perspective that you think about it, unencumbered by the limitations of the corporate anchor.
Right.
And you're right. Some of the companies are very good at always kind of incrementally going at it. But, look at it, it was, who was way back there? It was Monster, was way back there. AOL was way back there. Yahoo was way back there. And now we have the Facebook to Googles, and there's someone else who's going to disrupt them. And so I think the idea of open innovation is help us be that disruptor around, as you said earlier, real life challenges, a gap that needs to be filled.
Right.
And so help create that piece. So I think that's the exciting piece about me is that those business models is let's not try and constrain the definition. Okay, let's understand the output, the outcome we're trying to get to, and let the model flow based on that piece of it. So almost, allow us to change the game through innovation.
Right. Yeah, thanks. There are a bunch of other questions, but this conversation has been phenomenal. And Alok, I can't thank you enough for the deep insights that you gave us, and I'm sure we can go on with this conversation. But Kris, just before we kind of sign off, there's a good number of questions asking for. Can you share some info on the Open Innovation Contest and how can one apply?
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah,
happy to. So first of all, it's easy. HTTPS, and it's basically openinnovationoi.nttdata.com. And then you can basically say /en/contest. So, or just search on the web for Open Innovation at NTT Data number 11. You will get the same link. And the nice thing is, it's a very simple application. Look for your flag. Look for India, okay? It'll take you to the challenges, okay, that the clients are interested at coming from that space. There's also a link on there to someone who help you. So this isn't just a good luck. We actually have coaches who will help you apply, help you find the right answers. As we get selected from the panelists down to the finalist, we will help you compete. So this is, back to Luke's point, our value here is how we help you be successful with our clients and engage in that model. So we're very excited about it. Registration is open until October 31st.
Yeah.
And then the door closes. And the goal is really to give those finalists a couple of weeks to finalize their pitches, their presentations, to have a chance to win. November 11th and 12th is the competition, okay? And it's just a matter of having 2 days. And then January is the finals, again, virtual in Japan. But that's the whole idea. So it's Open Innovation 11, NTT Data. Right.
Thanks, Kris. You made a comment, you talked about, you referred to Google and Facebook in one of something that you were talking in the course of conversation. And, it's something I think that we discuss every day in office. And, Alok can, comment on that as well, saying, when are we going to see the next likes of Google or Facebook from India, right? Or somebody even better. And I always say, hope contests like this actually help, push some of that further, that, sooner, right? And help us achieve some of that for India as well at a much faster pace, right? That's something that always tugs my heart. And, but with that, I'd really like to, I just want to check, Kris, Alok, any last parting comments that you may have for our audiences?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. I think this was great. Appreciated the contest. Look, great connecting with you. Appreciated your insight. Hope to keep the conversation going. And Kritika, on other questions we didn't answer, please feel free to send those to us.
Yes.
Happy to try and respond to those companies, those pieces,
Definitely.
because the key for us is this is all about connecting and engagement, and really excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Kris. Great connecting up with you. And thank you, Kritika, for moderating this so well.
Thank you.
You brought out whatever best we had to offer.
Oh, thanks, Alok. I was a little iffy about this one, and I was a little nervous. So I'm glad you think it went well. So
It went fine.
So much. Thank you so much for your time, Alok. Thank you so much, Kris. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Team NTT Data, and thank you, Team NASSCOM. See you all soon.
Yeah. Thank you, NASSCOM. Take care. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.